Hi, everyone. My name is Erin James. I'm the editor-in-chief at Sip Magazine, and you are here at the Full Pour, our weekly broadcast that we do Thursdays at 5 p.m. with guest producers, mixologists, just general drink lovers of all shapes and sizes. And we have a big cider drinker and personality here with us today. We have Dave Takush of Towns Ciderhouse in Corvallis, Oregon, joining us, and I'm going to bring him in right now. It's like the Today Show, right?
Yeah. Hey, Erin, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. We've been having some incredible weather down here in Corvallis, so everyone in Corvallis is very excited because the sun is out and like the grass is green, and we're all very pumped for the nice weather.
It's like spring. It lets us know that it's happening even though we don't know what day it is or where we are. It's spring, so that's good. Yeah. So we're here to talk about cider, drink cider. We want to hear from you and what you're drinking and enjoying out there in the interwebs. We worked with Towns on setting up a bundle so that if you were able to purchase in time, you got the 4 ciders that Dave and I are going to be tasting today. But if not, that's fine too. We're going to be talking about cider styles, cider apples, cider Dave, lots of things. So I'm going to let you take the reins here, and I'll post my first fact. All the cool kids drink cider. And I'll let Dave go from there.
Awesome. Did you see my chat? I posted a chat. I don't know if it's working yet. I'm new to this video stream thing, so we're going to try to keep it entertaining here. The first thing, Erin, I think we should do before we get started is drink some cider. That's important. That's what we're here for. So all the people out there that have an opener, don't be shy. Drink any cider you have right now. We're going to be starting with the Branch and Barrel, which I'm going to grab from right behind me. This is the first one we're going to be discussing. And hey, there we go. And I'm going to grab a glass. We're going to pop this bad boy. I think what we're going to do today is, well, first let's just have a little cheers, because that's important anytime you crack open a cider. So Erin,
cheers.
Thank you so much for all you've done for the cider industry. I think that's worth noting. And thanks for adapting and doing some new cool stuff like streaming. So
we're just trying to navigate these wild waters. Cheers.
Okay.
I don't have this yet.
So what we're going to do is we're going to talk a little bit, instead of just describing the aromas that we get out of these, because that's a little boring. We're going to actually be focusing on why we're seeing the specific aromas in these different styles of cider. And while we're going to be talking about Towns products, these ingredient types, process styles that we're going to be covering, they apply to ciders from all around the world. So there's going to be some fun info, and we're going to keep it kind of moving forward, and we're going to keep it lively here. If you have any comments or questions, put them in the text box, the chat box, and we'll try to get to them as we move along. But yeah, here, let me put this Branch and Barrel up so everyone can know. There we go, Branch and Barrel happening now. And okay, so what are we getting here? Well, a couple quick things to note is this is pretty fruit forward. When you taste it, you'll notice it's very high acid, and that's stereotypical of an heirloom cider. So there's a number of ways to classify this cider. You could call it possibly a New World modern cider, like heirloom subcategory. You could call it an heirloom cider, but the basic thing is that we're using high acid apples that maybe have a little bit more depth and character than your normal dessert fruit. So it's going to be a little bit more robust. higher acid contents. Not tons of tannin, but there's definitely a little bit there.
Dave, real quick and do a quick, real quick Apple 101. So you said heirloom apples and dessert apples. Could you explain what those are real quick?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so of course, there's a lot of different ways of defining apples, but generally dessert or culinary apples, when people refer to those, we're talking about the apples that you see in the grocery store, more modern apples that are like Fuji, Golden Delicious, Jana Gold, these big sweet apples for eating. Those would be the dessert or culinary. And heirloom apples can fall into that category. But generally, when we talk about heirloom apples, these varieties of apples, they have a little bit more acid content. They tend to be a little bit more rustic, got a little bit more depth of flavor, maybe some tannins. And the technical definition of heirloom, right, is like a historical or antique variety that hasn't changed since it was originally bred. So the apples that are going into this branch and barrel are like these kind of older, high acid apples, things like, let's see, a golden russet. That is a great example. It's a very old apple coming from around the 1700s. And when you eat that apple, you can taste the qualities that there's like some really packs a punch with acid and flavor, and that's coming out in this cider. Mm-hmm. The other just fun note about this cider particular is that it was aged for a portion of the cider was aged for a time in French oak foeders, which are these big, like really, really big oak barrels. So for those of you out there that might be picking up a hint of oak character, there is some in here too. But the defining characteristics of these heirloom, like New World modern ciders are that they have a driving acidity, clean, fruit-forward flavors, and they make them very good pairings with food. These are great ciders for Thanksgiving or for pairing with all sorts of varieties of food.
So in going back a little bit on the foeders, why use big, huge oak barrels? What does that do to the cider?
Well, these high acid ciders, especially ones that are a little higher in alcohol too, they usually benefit from just a hint of aging. Now, if you put cider into a regular wine barrel, you can sometimes, depending on the age of the wine barrel, pick up too much oak character. And you can over oak the cider. And so the big French oak foeders do a really good job of imparting just the right amount of oak character into your cider. And it has to do with the fact that the bigger the vessel, the larger the volume of liquid in the barrel, and thus the greater ratio of liquid to oak. So if you have a very, very small barrel, you only have a little bit of liquid, but you still have a pretty big surface area of oak touching that liquid. And as you increase the size of that barrel, your liquid volume goes up, but not at the same rate as the surface contact for your barrel. So you end up getting less oak character with the bigger vessels. And so sometimes those smaller wine barrels are not appropriate stylistically, depending on what you're trying to do.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So anyway, when you see like a kind of out there in the world ciders that are made from things like Rhode Island greening, golden russet, things like maybe Roxbury russet is another great one, Newtown Pippin. They all have this common trait of being high acid and having a great depth of flavor. So that's what we're seeing in this guy. And this is actually a cider that's really holding up well to age because of the high alcohol and the high acid, and it's light and fresh and refreshing, not too dry, not too sweet. And, you know, I think a lot of people out there, they really sometimes get fixated on sweetness. And it's important to remember that most ciders, no matter what the style is, you can make them sweet or you can make them dry. And they might not traditionally be supposed to be sweet or something like that, but you have that option. And so this one is just like right in the middle of the road. It's got a little bit of, you know, a little bit of sweetness and a little bit of acidity, and makes it really nice and balanced. And that's why we're starting with this one too. We're going to get into some kind of more crazier and wild ciders as we progress along.
But this has really great like golden fruit flavors to it, which I like. So I'm thinking like yellow apple, golden raisin. Like I love that. And then a little bit of just kind of that oak background, maybe more with like texture than it is any kind of oak flavor. Yeah,
kind of lingers on the tongue a little bit. And one of some people that may be more familiar with McIntosh apples over in the Midwest or in the East Coast, this does have a little bit of McIntosh in it, which gives it that very floral, almost perfumey kind of character. So if you are like, whoa, that's super appley, fresh, perfumey, that's the McIntosh sneaking out. And I think McIntosh apples, everyone on the West Coast is always a little bit jealous of the East Coast people that have them for a dime a dozen. And out here on the West Coast, they're kind of hard to get. But that's a really fun thing that we're starting to see in the United States, is this kind of geographic identification stylistically. You know, in the rest of the world, when you talk about wines, it took several hundred years to develop those differences, you know, Italian wines versus French wines. And what's kind of fun is we're seeing that in the United States now as a little bit of divergence in terms of style based on geographic region and within the US. And that's just awesome. It's really fun to see that. It means the industry's growing and people are branching out and doing, you know, new fun things. And depending on where they are, their ingredients are driving stylistically what the ciders are going to be like. So with that, I think that we should maybe move on to the next cider.
Right.
We're going to talk about, again, ingredients and why the ingredients matter and what we're tasting and smelling in our glasses. So the next cider that we're going to get out is the 2018 vintage Cider Boucher. It's a super fun one. This is going to be like worlds apart from the last one we did.
Very, very different. I would also like to point out that you and I are both drinking out of regular old glasses, and I am a firm believer in you should drink cider in glasses that hold cider.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. You know, a lot of people, especially here at Two Towns even, are sometimes hyper concerned about the glass, and especially when they're talking to me, because they know I have a food science background and like a wine background. And there's, you know, I think a lot of pros with being conscious of your glassware and situations where it matters. But in this situation, it totally doesn't matter. So if you're at home, feel free to finish the one glass of cider and pour into the same glass. Like, we don't have to get all fancy and have different glasses for every single cider, different shaped glasses. You know, when I'm at home, the number one glass I use is just a mason jar. And that goes for red wine through champagne. It doesn't really matter in the end, unless it matters to you personally. And then if it does, go for it. Get that champagne flute. Go get the Belgian beer glass. There's nothing wrong with that. It's awesome if you can. But if all you have is one wooden cup, just use that.
Yeah, that's what they used to do.
Or maybe like a horn or something. Okay, so we're opening the 2018 Cider Boucher right there. And And note here, we have several different vintages of the Cider Boucher. And the 2018 is one of my favorites. This cider, I guess I should have like poured it in the camera, but this cider, the 2018 vintage, compared to some of the other vintages, is a little bit more Brett forward, a little bit more wild character. And so let's dive into this one here.
There was a question that popped up. What is a typical cider glass, though? How would you answer that?
Oh boy. Well, I think that it depends on where you are in the world. So Jacqueline, Christine, Dalton, what is a typical cider glass? Great question. So if you are in Normandy, France, your typical cider glass is going to be a shallow, wide, stoneware ceramic glass. That is the like stereotypical glass of Brittany. And I believe they use that in Normandy too, but west coast of France, historically, you're drinking it out of like a stoneware glass. But then, as the years go by, at some point in the 70s, there was a fad for those little wine glasses that had no headspace. And there you go. Anything that holds liquid is appropriate. And then, it's changed over the years. In Spain, they use squat little glasses that almost kind of look like a whiskey tumbler. Mm-hmm. If you are in England, you might have used like a leather jerkin, like a cup that was made out of leather and sealed with pitch or pine. And so like that question, right, is kind of dependent on where you would be in what time period. For me personally, when I'm like evaluating glasses, I like just small wine glasses. They do the best for me. And that's actually, Aaron, I want this one that I am drinking out of. This is a international standard wine glass. So yeah. it is like a specific, but it's
a snooty glass.
Yeah, this is the snooty glass, but it's just because I went into our sensory lab and stole it right before this meeting. So.
I have a glass. I'm gonna grab it real quick.
Okay, so for those of you who are out there still with us, we're talking about the 2018 Cider Boucher. And this is a French style cider. Yeah, there you go.
This is the one from made by 33 Books in Portland.
Oh, yeah.
And this is a cider mug, a traditional, I think, English cider mug that we made it after. It's ceramic. Wait.
There you go.
Here.
It's got like a thing so you don't drop it. You can like attach it to your belt or something.
Yeah, just in case you've had too much cider. Safely attach it to self. Anyway, keep going.
So we're doing the Cider Boucher, and this is a French style keeved cider. And so what that means is that the residual sweetness in here is from the initial sweetness of the juice. We didn't blend back fresh juice or add any sugar or anything like that. So the fermentation was actually stopped or halted early so that there was some residual sweetness left. The French, over the course of time, have developed a really neat process of doing that naturally. This was before pasteurization, before filtration, before anything crazy like that. They used the natural properties of their apple varieties to do this process. So that's where we kind of get into this cool thing about, ingredients matter stylistically. And in France, all of their apple varieties are very, very low acid. They're low acid varieties. So we were just drinking a cider that was made from high acid varieties. Those types of varieties that were traditionally found, maybe some in England and a lot in the New World of America back in the 1800s. But what we're drinking now in the Cider Boucher are these low acid, bittersweet varieties. Mm-hmm. So they have tons of tannin, which are tannins, for those of you who don't know, are polyphenols. They're what makes wine taste astringent. And they also make cider astringent or a little bit bitter.
I was going to describe it as the dryness on your tongue.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the little texture that tannin offers.
Yeah. And generally, like dessert fruit, the culinary fruit we had been talking about, that's meant for eating. And you don't want a bunch of drying bitter tannins on your tongue when you're eating a juicy apple. But these French varieties were bred specifically to have tannin because it really adds to the character of this style of cider. So French ciders, they are characterized as having a lot of like wild kind of characters, as well as overripe fruit flavors, really high tannin levels, and very low acid levels. And what that ends up giving you is these like very barnyard characteristics. So like hay, horse blanket, like the essence of being in a farm in springtime, you know, some kind of apple blossom.
Visual. But not in a negative way, and not in an overly consuming way either. It's a very subtle barnyard.
They should all like harmonize with each other and balance each other out. Nothing should stick out too much.
Think like the baby lamb versus like massive cow. Right?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, right, exactly. They're like fresh of the earth and that kind of stuff. And yeah, these apples are what they do. There you got. Sean just asked about the chapeau brun, and that means brown cap in French. And that is a part of the keeving process. So what happens when you're in France or when you're at Two Towns making a French style cider is that you press the fruit and then you wait and you let that juice develop all the pectins. And sometimes you can add a little calcium to help with that, just a little bit of calcium. And sometimes you can add a little enzyme too to help with the process. But traditionally back in the day, because they were using the right varieties of apples, it only works with these low acid, high tannin varieties. But they could get their juice to keeve naturally. And the keeving process is what happens when the pectin solidifies and you actually get this like pectin jelly that floats all the way to the top of the juice tank and forms this brown cap, the chapeau brun. And what happens is all the yeast, the solid, they're all trapped in this jelly matrix. And what's left at the bottom of the tank is very, very clear apple juice. And that is what you take to your fermentation tank and you let it do a wild fermentation, no yeast added. And you get these really crazy flavors. You get a lot of overripe fruit characteristics. And the key is that because that juice is so clear, there's not a lot for the yeast to do in there. And they kind of poop out after about halfway. So you end up with a kind of lower alcohol, higher sweetness cider. And if some people out there are going, wow, it doesn't really taste super sweet. I mean, there's some sweetness, but it's not super sweet and it's kind of drying on my tongue. Well, that's because of the tannins. And what you get is this fun play between sweetness and tannins. So you get the sweet aromatics, but then it's a drying finish and it's all well and balanced and harmonized. And
that's one of the best explanations for keeving that I've heard.
Okay, thanks. And we only have, like so much time here. So
yeah, no, that makes total sense.
Yeah. But anyway, so when we're talking about old world keeved ciders, you're usually talking about things that are low in acid. They should have some amount of residual sugar. There's probably a lot of wild characteristics, but there's also probably a lot of overripe fruit characters. And you can see they're usually a little bit darker in color. And that's because of the tannins or the polyphenols that are in there. So, I do want to say also, if there are people out there that are thinking about, they're saying, whoa, that last cider was great and this cider is horrible. That is okay. You can say that. You can feel that, because I kind of relate these old world bittersweet ciders to kind of like blue cheese. Some people just love it, and it is highly regarded as like one of the best kinds of cheese. But there's also people that just don't like blue cheese. They're like, the cheese is moldy. Why would you ever drink that or eat that? So, like, don't feel bad if this isn't your bag, not your style. It's okay. We got plenty of other crazy kinds of cider to try after this. Should we move on in the essence of time here?
Yeah, someone had asked if we could do if either of us wanted to throw some cider, and I don't know if you think either of these or any of these would be good for a long pour.
Oh no, well, I cannot do that.
Neither can I. I'm very clumsy.
B, my office has carpet in it, so I don't want to get cider in the carpet. It'll never come out. Long pours are best done outside if you're an amateur. I can say that from experience. And
with cider that doesn't have too many bubbles in it. Otherwise, actual carbonation continues to get a little explosive when popping out of the glass. But
for sure. Let's move on to the prickly paradise. Stuff this back here. Now, if you happen to be a Towns cider drinker, you may know that one of our specialties is making some pretty wild fruit ciders. We are here in like the Willamette Valley, and we started back in the day making rhubarb cider and marionberry cider, and then we did like a Oregon grown kiwi berry cider with like little mini kiwis, and it just started going from there. And over the years, we've done a couple versions of a cactus cider, also known as a prickly pear cider. This one that we're going to be doing right now is our latest version of the prickly paradise. I'm going to go ahead and open this and pour it into a glass, but I've got to finish my lap.
Pear pink, the flesh pink?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I knew that.
So
that color.
It is wild. The color on prickly pears, the fruit is it's like almost a neon in the fruit. Like it's a color that you would think wouldn't exist in nature in fruit. And there's actually a lot of different kinds of prickly pear cacti. There are prickly pear cacti that have green fruit. There's prickly pear cacti that have like a whitish or yellow fruit. Some that also have like a very, very red character. And then there's other ones that have almost like a neon purple. So we actually use two different varieties, the red and the purple cactus varieties. And the cacti have these big wide leaves that are green. And then they make these little bulbous, about the size of an apple, but like these little bulbous fruiting bodies that are purple or green or yellow or whatever they are. And very carefully, you can go and pick these fruit off the cactus. And then we turn them into a puree, and then we ferment that with the apple juice, and we get some of the nice color coming out. And then the crazy thing, if anybody has put their nose in the glass yet, is prickly pear cacti, or the fruit from the cactus. It kind of smells like watermelon, like almost like watermelon bubblicious. If anybody used to chew that back in like 5th grade.
That's exactly what it smells like.
Isn't that crazy? Watermelon bubblicious. It's like, it's wild.
It's total watermelon though.
Yeah.
I don't know what gives the bubblegum quality, but it's not bubblegum though. I feel like that's not a positive tasting note necessarily. But bubblicious is delicious. So
watermelon bubblicious is just what comes to me. But a lot of people say melon, like just generally like melon, and that goes for anywhere from honeydew to cantaloupe or whatever. And the really interesting thing with some of these ciders too is that, or the cactus ciders, is that you can get some super like volcanic earth soil characteristics coming out, like desert quality. And it depends on growing region, and it depends on what variety of fruit you're using. Just like the world of apples, there's all sorts of apples where there's all sorts of prickly pear varieties. And, like the color varies too. So you may see batch to batch variations in color. But yeah, Adrian, Watermelon Jolly Rancher. There you go.
Madison would like you to share how much prickly pear per gallon.
It's a lot, and I don't know off the top of my head. I think she asked that just to ruffle my feathers.
Yes, it with a winky face. So
I'll have to. I don't know. I could go out to the production, the cellar, and get the production logs, but I think I'd rather just drink some cider here too. So. Okay, but as far as stylistically, this is definitely smack dab in the New World Modern style, and then it's of course the fruit style of cider. And so the base apples we use for these are those dessert apples that we had previously been talking about. Medium acid, very fruit forward, clean, light flavors. Makes it very easy drinking. That's the great thing about dessert fruit and New World Modern styles of cider, whereas many other styles can be like super robust or like very big and loud. The New World Modern styles of cider are just super easy drinking, very chill, and they make great bases for adding other fruits because they're clean. They've got just a nice apple characteristic, and they blend and meld really well with like exotic fruits or other wild kinds of agricultural products like rhubarb or honey and things like that. So I think the blend in here is probably like a lot of John of Gold, like Pink Lady, a lot of Pink Lady, and maybe some Golden Delicious, or a blend of many other things. We usually try to get a huge blend of dessert fruit when we're making the base for these fruit ciders. And then of course, prickly pear puree is what we put in, along with a little bit of prickly pear juice. Yeah.
Kristen, our publisher, is asking, what's your response to the cider purists that are so against putting adjuncts in there? And by adjuncts, she means any kind of addition that isn't apple or yeast.
Yeah, well, I would say that if you don't like fruit ciders or ciders that have adjuncts, then yeah, like don't buy them. And there's plenty of awesome traditional styles of cider out there that you can get, and we make them too because we know some people aren't as into the big fruity ciders and they want more of that complex old world kind of characteristics. So that's why we make all of them. But if you're coming from the viewpoint of saying that people shouldn't be putting things like blackberries into cider, I would refer them to the craft beer industry and what's happened there, right? Back in the day, there was a lot of people that said, well, we should only be using malt, water, hops, and yeast. And that's fine if you're trying to recreate Weihenstephaner. But if you are wanting to break the bounds and barriers and progress forward in an industry, there shouldn't be any limits on what you can do. And what we've seen, right, is citrus IPAs. That was a huge thing, and it brought a lot of joy to a lot of people to try, grapefruit IPAs. And if it's a fad, then so what? It was a cool fad while it lasted, and and if it's here to stay, then it's here to stay. And I think you could even make the argument that, for example, like West Coast IPA, every single brewer in England was like, what the heck are you guys doing in America with IPA that's got that many hops? It was never supposed to be that way. You guys are doing it wrong. Well, now you look and what's happening, the entirety of Europe and the UK is copying the American craft brew industry. So props to all the brewers that, here at Two Towns, every single person grew up during the heart of the craft beer revolution, watching Deschutes do their thing, watching Green Flash and Lagunitas and all these guys come out with these crazy and crazier IPAs. And that inspired us to do what we do. So it's hard to say that there's anything wrong with doing things like putting blackberries into cider. If it doesn't sell and it's not popular, then it kind of proves its own point. But boy, right now there's a lot of fruit cider being sold around the world. And I think that proves the point that, creativity, innovation, like what's going to be the next awesome thing. So
preach.
Sorry, did I get a little preachy there?
No.
Did I get a hallelujah?
Yeah, I was gonna say that's what I got. I'm with you. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you should drink what you want to drink and let other people do the same thing.
Yeah, I think putting restrictions and saying, that you shouldn't be doing something is is not, it's not helpful for the industry. Okay. Dave is a shred and surfer. What is your first cider after getting barreled in the Pacific Northwest? Okay, well, Boomer, the number one thing is that I am a longboard surfer, and a not very good one. So I have never been even close to getting barreled in the Pacific Northwest, unless you count a giant wave crashing right on top of me. And so, when I get out of the surf of having a giant wave just crash on top of me and getting totally wrecked, my first cider I go for is a lighter, easy drinking cider. And depending on the size of the wave, maybe one with higher alcohol if I'm hurting. So
we got one more question for you on a recommendation. Glenda would like to know what you recommend for not too sweet cider for a beginner.
Oh, okay. Yeah. The Bright Cider, I just happen to have this right here. Look at that. Bright Cider. This is a great one. It's our flagship. It's made with Newtown Pippin apples, and it's well balanced. So right in that sweet spot of nice balance of acidity and sweetness, not too sweet, not too dry. It's kind of the what a lot of people here in the United States think of when they think sparkling apple cider. I would say also, if you want something similar that's maybe like a little bit drier, you could go with the branch and barrel that we have right here. It's a little bit more robust, a little drier, a little higher acid content, but that's another really great one that everybody seems to like. And if you want to get something super special, we did come out with this fun one that's only available here in Corvallis. It's called Barn Dance, and it's just made with apples from within 50 miles of our cellar. And we made it in collaboration with our local natural food store. And so it's just a little fun one we made that is a real crowd pleaser. Okay, so if we're looking at this list, the next one we got is the Pommeau to go over. And I'm going to show this right here for folks. If people out there on the live stream are worried about opening this large bottle of 19% alcohol dessert cider, don't worry. Go ahead and open it. It will be totally fine after you open it, and you can put the cork back in and you can save it for a very long time, like years. No problem. It's not going to go bad. After a really extended period of time opened, you might get a teeny bit of oxidation, but I mean, I don't think anybody would, after a year, say that it has deteriorated in any way after opening, because the point of these fortified ciders, so these are in a class of ciders called fortified ciders, which means that they have spirits added, apple spirits, like distilled spirits. The alcohol content is very high, and thus it's a natural preservative. So just like your whiskey in your cabinet, it's not going to go bad after you open it. This stuff, I have a bottle of this opened right next to all of my olive oils and vinegars and all my cooking stuff in my kitchen, because I use this all the time for finishing like recipes in the kitchen, and it's just open. And I might even pour a little for myself, and a little for the saucepan, pour a little for myself, a little for the saucepan.
What's your favorite thing to cook with it?
You know, I usually use it like if I want a touch of sweetness or fruitiness on a glaze of some sort. And that could be with savory dishes too, but usually just as a finishing like glaze for something. Yeah. And traditionally, so let's talk about Pommeau traditionally. Mm-hmm. So Pommeau traditionally is it's a French product, and specifically in Normandy they make this, and it is fresh pressed apple juice, and it's usually the cider apples, those old world cider apples, and they press the juice, and then they take the apple brandy from the previous year and they dose it into the apple juice, and they bring the alcohol content all the way up to around 16% alcohol. And that kills any yeast that's in there. So it preserves it and it makes it stay sweet. So it's a very nice, sweet dessert wine. If you've ever had ice wine or dessert wine of anything that style, or if you're familiar with port wine, it's the same process as port wine, except it's apple spirits and apple juice instead of grape spirits and grape juice. So there you go. Yeah. Pommeau is a great gift to bring to somebody's house. It's great to share around in a party. And the funny thing about Pommeau is, while it is a great gift and it's a fancy thing, it started out as a very, very rural countryside thing in Normandy. And in fact, Pommeau was illegal in France until the 80s when they legalized it. And because of that, it had this like underground, like, country, like all the farm wives would be using this in their cooking. And it was like the secret ingredient for a lot of recipes that come out of Normandy, especially sauces that involve cream. So if you want to look up some historical or like really, really fancy French countryside recipes, Pommeau is kind of the secret ingredient in that. And you know what? We need to open this and try this.
I'd like to make a side note and say that this is a wax top, which is kind of daunting, but it is thin enough of where the cork comes out that it comes out so easily.
And you know what I did, Aaron?
No grunting involved.
I brought, which I just dropped on the floor. Here we go. I brought a knife to show people how to open one of these, because I have also heard people that are unsure and about the wax seal on the top.
Full
and I'm going to show you.
Mine plunged straight in, super easy. It's nice and clean. Well, as the wax like falls off, but you know what I mean.
And you totally can just do that, and there's nothing wrong with just taking a wine opener and opening it up. But if you want to do it the fancy way, I'm going to show you right now, and this is what it should end up like. I opened this one earlier, and you can see that there's just a nice clean line on the bottle and no wax flakes. Many times, if you've got a key style wine opener where you put it in and you lever it up, there's a little knife on the back of your key style wine openers, and a lot of people have always wondered what those are for, and they're for opening the foil on a wine. Hey, you got it right there. All right.
Woo!
So you can use one of those too. What you're going to do is just right under the lip here, you want to start with, and you usually use a smaller knife is a lot easier to use. And you're going to see if I can back up here. Just go right under the lip and make a circle and score around in a circle right under the lip. And you want to connect back with where you started. And if you don't get it perfect, then no worries.
I'm going to put this in.
And then once you've done that, you can just, you can try if you'd like to just twist it off. And if that doesn't work, you can use the knife or the back of the knife to try to pop it off right there. And if you look right there, I just popped it off and the top comes off in one whole piece and you've got a clean, fancy looking bottle. Just like that. Yeah.
Sorry, I have side commentary running with my 1-year-old right
now. Aaron, what is your 1-year-old's favorite cider to drink?
Well, now I feel prompted. I feel like he should probably make a cameo.
Yeah, cameo in while I open this.
He likes to drink any cider that Mom has.
All right.
He particularly likes cans. He's very excited about cans. Oh, yeah. And he tries to drink it. And knock it over. And this is what working in quarantine's like. What's it like for you?
I'm doing the same thing at my house, except with sheep instead of children, but very similar thing.
I have a dog too, and she's often more demanding. So.
Okay, so now that we have this open, grab the glass right here. Boom. Okay, Pommeau. It's a still product, and we're going to go into the glass just a little bit. Some interesting differences with, our Pommeau versus the French Pommeau is that in France, the average alcohol content is around 15%, maybe 16. And ours is 19, and it's just because the apples that we get here tend to be a little bit sweeter than in France. We have a little hotter climate than in Normandy, so to balance out that increased sweetness, we just added a little extra spirits. Hey, there's somebody from Norway here. Bonjour. All right. Oh, wait. Did that say, hold on. Did that say Norway or Normandy?
Yeah, Norway.
Oh, Norway. Great. Okay. I thought it said Normandy. Sorry.
But we'd had someone say that they had Calvados in Normandy. It's actually my brother-in-law's mother, Linda.
Hey, in Normandy. There you go. That is awesome. That is awesome. And also for the person from Norway, I do have to say, we actually have family back there and relatives. And my cousins and I all went last summer to Norway and visited where our family came from. And I got to say, it was one of the most beautiful countries I've ever seen in my life. Norway is incredible. So to everyone out there in Norway, skål.
I'm Swedish. Does that make us natural enemies?
It's possible, yes.
Also Czech and lots of miscellaneous, so I'm not. No.
A lot of Viking battles. Okay, so this Pommeau, what some of the characteristics you get are, of course, fruit forward, overripe apple, and a lot of spiritus aromas. But the things you shouldn't see in a Pommeau is like a harsh alcohol. It should be smooth and sweet and voluptuous, and you can also get a little bit of caramely notes from the oxidation. This has to age in barrel for at least a year. And I think in Normandy, they do it for 2 years. And that is where the magic happens. The magic happens in the aging process. When you first make these, it is very similar to taking, imagine taking some brandy and pouring it into a glass of apple juice. Well, it's like, it's kind of brandy and juice. And what happens over time is that those flavors integrate, and you get some from the barrel characters starting to pick up. And then you also get like a mellowing or a smoothing out of the tannins. And you end up with something that is just gorgeous in terms of the sweet aromatics, all harmonizing together with a nice sweetness on the mid palate. And then it should dry out because there should be just enough tannins in there. So we had somebody ask if Pommeau can be ordered, and it sure can be.
I just love that the Two Towns team is all on here with comments being like, you can buy it here, you can get it here.
Our marketing director is like, yes, in fact, it can be ordered online. Yes, Pommeau will definitely make your quarantine weekend a lot better. For
really
sure.
Like Boomer's commentary. Got good things to say.
Yeah. I just want to go over, let's see if we have character and use, blend of many. Another thing about our Pommeau versus the Normandy Pommeau is that we tend to use some high acid varieties in here too to give it a little bit more zing. I think it actually makes it a little bit more food friendly when there's a little bit more acid in it. I don't think there's such a broad spectrum of what you can do, and there's no specifically right way. This is just our take on it. So our Pommeaus tend to be a little bit higher in alcohol, a little higher in acid, a little sweeter, a little bit more towards like an ice wine, dessert wine style. Whereas in Normandy, their Pommeau sure is drinkable. You can drink a lot of it. It's a little bit more easy drinking, and but that's just regional differences, and that's kind of the fun thing to do, is the American take on the style versus the French take on the style. For those of you out there that would like to try a traditional French style Pommeau, and if you don't have access to like getting one that's imported, Easy Orchards in Salem, Oregon, Kevin Zielinski, he's a big Francophile, and he makes a great traditional French style Pommeau that's a little lower in alcohol, but it's also a great example of what Pommeau can do.
Chris asked if there are any rules about pairing cider with food.
Yeah, I think I don't know if anyone out there has ever seen Pirates of the Caribbean, but they're more like guidelines than actual.
I like it. Good job, nerd.
So yes, there's some guidelines you can go with. I hate putting like rules on stuff. Maybe besides like, don't drink red wine with fish. That's kind of like a big one. But for cider, it's a little bit more relaxed. And I would say that usually some general rules that you can go by or guidelines are pairing a cider where the style of the cider, let's just say it's a French style cider, it will inherently go great with any French style food. I mean, like it's just because they've been developed together. Another thing too is usually like with like. So if you've got a very big, robust meal, like a big barbecue or something where there's tons of strong flavors, you want a big, robust cider. And if you're eating something that's super delicate, like you wouldn't want to pair this. You wouldn't want to pair a delicate like spring salad with pommeau, because pommeau has got tons of sweetness and spirituous aromas, and it's like a big 19% alcohol sweet cider. This is something you want to pair with like decadent raspberry chocolate cake and, you know, dried figs and or like if you want to go on the savory side, some maybe charcuterie stuff, pâtés and liver pâté. That's actually one of the classic pairings with pommeau is foie gras. So in that sense, you've got these really rich, strong foods with really rich, strong ciders. But if you've got like a nice, delicate meal, go with a nice, delicate cider. And if you really like pommeau with your salad, then go for it. You know, it's like, it's not the end of the world.
And considering we're probably not eating a lot of foie gras in quarantine, do you have any good, or do you have any go-to cider and dinner meals that are easy to make?
Yeah.
That you would recommend?
Okay, this is kind of an out of the box one, but I think it works really well. Generally, cider I love with thanks, Paxton. Generally, cider I love with sweet potatoes. So like just a regular, like our regular old bright cider with sweet potato fries. Oh my gosh, such a great pairing. Salty sweet potato fries, sweet potato tater tots, or maybe sweet potato tacos. If anybody's out there has done that, sweet potato tacos with like that would go great with the Branch and Barrel.
Mac and cheese. Mac and cheese and cider is like the best thing ever. It makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Annie's or Kraft if you want, but Annie's white cheddar shells.
Oh yeah.
And like, I think actually bright cider would probably be best at that. Something with like nice and fruity and bright acid. Yeah, exactly. And other, things in terms of like cider and rules. I just don't think that there's a lot of rules, but there are a lot of guidelines you can take from like historical kind of things. If you look at northern Spain and the Basque region up there, or Asturias, they have these ciders that are very, very dry, very acetic in character, and they are inherently just like light and refreshing and pretty funky and wild. And they go great with the tapas there, like seafood tapas, or like, I know one is like bull intestine and tomato sauce, and it's like that with some cider. It's just great, and cider loves cheese. The classic pairing would be a French cider like Cider Boucher with the cheeses of the region of Normandy. So we're talking about Libero, Camembert, Neufchâtel, Pont-l'Evêque, these kinds of soft, creamy cheeses that are very, very strong and powerful, go great with like a funky, wild Normandy cider. And if you're drinking a cider that's a little drier and higher acid, try sharp cheddars, like the English pairing, some English cider and sharp cheddar. You could go with a Chev and goat cheese with a New World Modern like cider, especially West Coast styles of cider. So if you've got something from Seattle Cider Company or Bin River or Two Towns,
all of those ciders go great with like chev or a goat cheese salad or something like that.
Dave, this has been a marvelous hour. We have officially gone overtime, like twice as long as we thought we would. And I want to make sure that we're able to wrap up in a timely fashion. Is it timely when you've gone twice as long over? I think it's
time, I think, yeah.
I think it's cute that we thought we could do this in less than 30 minutes. You and I are fairly verbose people.
Yeah.
You're short on words.
Yeah, I think it was maybe a little naive to say we could do it in 30 minutes, but I think an hour is the appropriate time, because if we don't stop now, we'll never stop.
We're just going to keep going. I'm pretty sure this has happened at a cider con or two.
Yeah.
In a bar later at night.
And I'm going to go back to my branch and barrel here for
I'm going back to Cider Boucher.
Farewell toast. Thank you to everyone out there who's supported us over the years. We really do appreciate it. Everyone who works here, pouring their passion into cider. Thanks you for supporting us and making it up so that we can do what we can do. So thanks to you all out there in the virtual world. Stay safe. And Aaron, I wish you the best. And, I can't wait for the next full pour. Who's on the next full pour?
Oh God, I should know that.
What's coming up?
It's too late now.
Sorry, did I put you on the spot?
But we lost them. So either way, thank you so much for joining us. I truly appreciate you being here. I appreciate the full force of the Two Towns team when tackling this, offering the bundles of the specific ciders for our viewers to be able to watch was awesome. So always a good time. Someday we will start our CiderCon band.
Oh, heck yeah.
If Scott's still on here, I don't think, who else was involved?
We needed a bass. We were still, Nick Gunn. Nick Gunn on the high harmonies.
Mm-hmm. And low harmonies, obviously.
And then we're still looking for a bass player for our cider band. So maybe there's some bass
available.
Right on. Well, thanks again, Aaron, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Dave. Cheers.